All right. I think we're all here and we're going to get started. People will probably go ahead and trickle in, but I am happy to welcome you all to our webinar, When Words Fail. Oh, I'm going to let somebody else in. Sorry about that, folks. Um, Today in this discussion, we are going to hit a couple of different topics. We're going to talk about product video, why you should be using it, and not only why you should be using it, but why it should be OEM sponsored. We also want to talk a little bit about how to scale video for any need, for any purpose, for any audience, and for any budget as well. And then we want to go ahead and talk a little bit about making sure that you're identifying the right people to help you with this subject matter as well. And so with that, um, I would like to change this and introduce you to the three people that you're seeing here. I'll start. My name's Laura McGowan. I am recently a business development director here at Tweddle. However, I have approximately 18 years of advertising experience, and then moving into video production for product specific here at Tweddle in their video department. I was an executive producer for nearly 10 years. And I was so passionate about the company and about the products and services that we have that I moved into this business development role. And so I've been doing this now for about a year and a half, but through and through, Tweddle passionate. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amy, who I used to work in advertising with, and let her introduce herself. And then we'll have our other guest, Nick, join in.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I oversee our integrated creative services team, and our primary role there is video production. We do CGI, and we also do some work with Unity and Unreal in developing image recognition apps and training experiences. So that's what we're doing. And as Laura mentioned, I have an extensive background in creating commercials for advertising agencies, and I also have some experience working in-house at post-production facilities and have been with Tweddle for 13 years now.
Right on.
All right, and I'm Nick Terzes. I currently work at Ford Motor Company, about 25 years in the auto industry. Majority of my background's been in vehicle engineering, product development, some time in marketing and manufacturing. So certainly enjoy the OEM space and have worked with Tweddle in the past, and looking forward to today's webinar.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to start off by thanking you both for being with me, and I hope that we have some really interesting conversation. A couple of housekeeping items that I wanted to share as before we really get into it, which is the intention of this is to be a very casual and open discussion, which essentially means that, while Amy and Nick and I do have some topics we want to hit, there is a Q&A button. So anybody on the webinar who has a Q&A, please don't feel like you have to wait until the end of the webinar to ask the question. Go ahead and hit that button up there, and we'll try to monitor that as best as possible. And the other thing that I wanted to share with you is that I'm going to play some video content, because what's a video webinar without playing some video content? And as long as team cooperates with me, you'll see that in the background as well. And so let me know at any point if that's not showing up. There won't be any audio though, because we'll be discussing topics over it. So with that, if you'll bear with me one moment, what I'm going to do is switch to exactly what I was just talking about on my multiple monitors here. So thank you for your patience. Talk amongst yourselves. All right, I'm going to share this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and I'm going to ask my first question to Amy, or maybe something that I think is really important that we discuss in depth, is really, what is a user? I think there's this maybe loose definition that a user always has to be a consumer who's using your end product. And I think first off, we want to clarify that that's not always the case. While consumers are some of our end users for automotive, smart home, tools, lifestyle products, etc., there's also other users of product video and instructional video, and those tend to be more of your heavy equipment, your trained skilled technician, your construction, medical device type of person. So in the manufacturing space, a good example of that is, there's you'll see some videos later on for a medical device company that instructs people how to operate the blister packaging on this machine. So as we talk about these topics, let's make sure that we have that broad understanding of a user. And Amy, I'd love if you have anything to add to that, or Nick too. Please feel free to add. But yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we see all different kinds of users, as you're stating, and actually we have a project right now that is going to be done in a factory environment where they have a lot of turnover. They have a lot of people that have varying educational backgrounds, and they need a really efficient way to train operators on how to use the equipment in their back room. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be showy. It needs to be direct. It needs to be clear and efficient. And so we're excited about doing that. Video isn't always about the glamour and showing off something that's pretty. A lot of times it's just very practical and meeting people where they are with communication that works for them. So, and looking at all different kinds of users, as you said.
Yeah, and I think, to add to that, certainly in an industry as large as the automotive industry, you think of the traditional user, customer, the person driving the vehicle, but it's far beyond that. I mean, of course, the technicians, salespeople, training personnel at the dealer level, internally at the company, test personnel, other engineers and marketing people that need to understand the product and how to use it so that they can speak intelligently about it or train others. So our user base is significant and broad, and from the start of a program, until it is in somebody's driveway, there's a lot of users that we need to keep in mind and consider.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that I want to start and ask everybody on this webinar right now is I want you to think back to the last time that you were one of those users and you needed some sort of help, whether it be on how to operate something or how to repair something for repair and maintenance, etc. And think about the first thing you did. You reach for your phone, right? You reach for your phone, you go to YouTube, type in your problem, what is it? And you are met with a host of information, right? So my first question for Amy really is, what is product video? Explain to us the purpose of it, what it is, and the end goal of a product video. What are we trying to get out of that?
Yeah, I mean, your goal is to create understanding, right? And to provide your end user, whoever they are, with a satisfying product experience, and to help demystify something that might be complicated. And I mean, I love what you were saying, Laura. My own personal example with that is with a new refrigerator that we purchased a couple years ago, and there was a spill, major international brand, and I needed to get the shelf out of the darn thing because it was gross. And I couldn't figure out, this should be a simple thing, right? I couldn't figure out how to do this at all. So the first thing I did was hit up YouTube, and sadly, there was nothing there from the manufacturer, but I found a gentleman who was like, yeah, this is a common problem. It's not mentioned in the owner's information. We don't know why, but here's how you get the thing out without breaking it. And I can tell you, I go back and reference that video repeatedly because it's not an intuitive process. I need to be reminded every time, and that video has saved me damaging my expensive purchase.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. If it's okay, I have an anecdote I'd also like to share, which is that my brother got some water sports equipment this summer, and I had the opportunity to ride it. I was deemed the person who will drive it from the drop off to the other side of the lake. We put We put it in the water, found out that the DNR was on the lake. And for all of you maybe who often vacation on lakes, you know that the DNR has a couple of questions for you if you do get stopped. One of them is, where is the fire extinguisher? And so my brother, who had already taken off in the vehicle with the owner's manual, by the way. So, I did something very similar, Amy. I actually was able to get online and to utilize that. Fortunately, the OEM did actually have a sponsored video for it, which popped up first in the SEO. Within 5 minutes, I knew exactly where to go and everything. So it seems to be a very, very common occurrence, if not daily occurrence. I'm sure Nick probably has a million examples of it as well, because he's very technically savvy. So.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the automotive space, certainly servicing vehicles, and operating them. I mean, in some cases, there's unique features and options, or there's operations that we'd call a blind operation, something that you can't directly see, but by having, say, video where it can show where you need to put your hand or put the tool to access, that's where there's opportunities. I think a lot about the home improvement space too, and the ability to quickly learn something that perhaps you feel intimidated by or have never done before, and at least get some understanding. If you're going to do it or you're going to have someone else do it, you can educate yourself a bit more so you know what's on the horizon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that actually brings me to my next question. And in some industries, it is a legal requirement, obviously, to have an owner's manual, automotive being one of them.
Yep.
But we also know that that video is pertinent in those instances. So my question, I think, to both of you is, I already have an owner's manual. Why do I need a video for this? And I think you're both going to have unique perspectives, Nick with the GT and Amy with your experience. So help me answer that question. I've gotten the written documentation. Why do I need to support it with video?
Well, I'm going to toss out some statistics right off the bat, and this even touches on what we were just speaking about, but statistically, we know that 53% of people hit YouTube the minute they're looking for information on a product, instructional content. The other thing, and I think this is probably the most compelling thing, is that people tend to be visual learners, right? Seeing is believing, and 95% of what is seen in a video is retained versus 10% of what is read in text. And that's really compelling. And it doesn't mean that text isn't necessary. I mean, sure, you definitely need those things for deep dives and, verification of certain things. But a video where you can see somebody doing what it is you need to do is just, you can't place a value on it.
Yeah.
You have a unique perspective, Nick, because you've been a product engineer and you worked in marketing, so you have both sides of the fence. So share with us.
Yeah, and it pains me sometimes because we spend a lot of time on owner's manuals, making sure all the technical data is good, the descriptions of how to operate systems are very detailed, and you'll find that in the dealers, certainly try to educate the customer, to look at the owner's manual, and oftentimes, vehicle might get sold 5-6 years later and it's still in its plastic wrap. So we know that generally people just don't grab for that owner's manual, but what they do is exactly what you just described. They will hop online if they want to know how something operates, or if they want to learn a little bit more, maybe about a feature, a drive mode. With vehicles that are more advanced or have special use cases, something like a sports car like the GT, they may have never seen certain features before, and it can be intimidating for them. And so this gives them an opportunity to start to build that confidence, see how, say, a professional will just walk them through not only how to use the feature, but what it actually does, and what it can do for you. We do a lot of that with like trailer towing and things like that too, where we have this vehicle very, very capable for the customer, but they maybe have never trailered before. So you want to start to build that confidence, make sure they're safe, and nothing better than having a video to walk through the steps, see it visually, be able to rewind, pause, things like that.
And it's almost kind of the expectation these days, right? I mean, we've all just talked about that in the previous examples. So there is an expectation for that. So I think my next question for you is really brand oriented, which is, if people are expecting this, as a brand, why should you be doing it? You want to make sure that you have customer satisfaction. I know there's a whole litany of things that are really important. So share with me your thoughts on why it's important, not only for the brand to have the video, but also that it be brand sanctioned, right? OEM sanctioned. So I'd love to hear your opinions on those as well.
Sure. Want me to go first, Amy?
Yeah, all you.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple key things. One is it's an opportunity to show off your product and your brand, right? If you execute the video well, you're going to show the product in its best possible light. You're going to make sure that, however it's being operated, it's exactly how we want the customer, the consumer, the dealer, perhaps, to show off the item, and it's going to be done accurately. And it's, again, if you invest the time and effort in making it look very visually appealing, now you also have this opportunity to kind of enhance the look and make it engaging, make it exciting and fun. I mean, that's part of it, right? We don't want it to be so sterile that it's just this, all you're doing is going through the steps, of how do I make something work? You want to make it fun and at the same time continue to build that confidence.
Especially in the instance of GT, which you're very familiar with, which is that there's a level of engagement that is also expected. And we'll talk a little bit more about those different production levels. But for something like that, where you're talking about a performance vehicle, there's an expectation of that brand representation and that engagement for some loyalty and some trust, right, to come along with that.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Amy, I'm going to actually switch the question for you, since Nick did such a beautiful job answering that.
Mhm.
My question to you is similar, which is, there are a lot of other third parties out there making instructional video. Some of them, some of them okay, right? So from a best practice maybe perspective, why not just rely on those people? What are the pitfalls to letting Joe Schmo in a garage give your customers that information?
Well, I mean, I got probably a somewhat lengthy answer for that, and I'll try and keep it simple. But, we're seeing a lot of people with really a lot of knowledge about products, and actually some pretty decent production value, that they're creating on their own in their garages at home or their kitchens or whatever the case may be. My refrigerator video is a great example. Here's the problem with that, though. Along with that expertise, they're also editorializing. And, the first thing that in the video I'm referencing was said by the gentleman on camera was, "This isn't in your owner's manual." And as a consumer, I'm like, well, that's insane. This is a very basic task. So now that's impacted my view of that brand and how they care for their consumers, right? Because you are building a relationship with the people who buy your product. And it's important that you are there for them after the purchase as well. And that means you need to be where they're going to look for you. You need to be on YouTube. You need to have videos on your brand site, all of those things. And, the other thing that's really important to remember is it's not just the person who's purchased your product. People research heavily ahead of time when they're going to make a purchase, and especially when they're going to invest a fair amount of money into something like a vehicle or home improvement, an appliance. They're going to see what other users' experiences are. And when you go to user-generated content and you have somebody saying, I would not recommend buying this product, but if you made that mistake, here's how you can get around problem A, B, and C. That's problematic. And we see a lot of videos like that with very high view counts. That should be alarming to any brand, truly.
So you spend all of this money building the brand of your product, and with I've seen examples with 22,000 hits on exactly what you're talking about, right? Which is somebody who is so frustrated with whatever it is that they're trying to attempt to do, they just flat out at the end say, "Don't buy this, don't buy it." It just so I think that's a huge counter financially as well, right? Those 22,000 views who have just watched that could be 22,000 potential customers.
Right.
And we will talk about cost later on, but that is something I think people have to keep in mind, right? Is that it's not just the cost of production, it is the cost of the sale you may potentially lose in the end, right?
Absolutely.
So thank you for adding that. And one of the other things I think I want to chat with you both about before we switch topics is something we commonly hear, which is my marketing team is already doing these videos, right? Um, I worked in advertising, Nick's worked in marketing, Amy's worked in advertising. We all know what that tone is, what the goal of that message is in that marketing and advertising space, right? So I want to understand from your perspective, what is the difference about after sales? You talked about after sales, which is really important, is to support that customer once they have purchased something. And in my mind, I think that's where there's a very, very strong line that draws between marketing and after sales support. I want Amy to talk a little bit about what what you think a video product team, your editors, your script writers, your the people who communicate with Nick to make sure technical accuracy is represented. Tell me about those people and what's so special about them.
Our team we've really worked hard to curate a group of people that are both sides of the brain, right? They have, intense creative ability, but they also are intensely organized, understand how important very small changes can be over a product life cycle. And I mean, one of the things I really like to say about our team is that they speak engineer. And that's not always something that, a marketing team has or needs to be focused on, frankly. I mean, they're very focused on selling a product and things like that. Whereas we really want to understand, the engineer's baby, so to speak, and make sure that what they've, put all of their heart and soul into designing, whether it's a windshield wiper stock or, I mean, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but there's people who spend their whole day thinking about this thing and making sure it's a good experience for the end user. We want to make sure we help communicate that. That it's successful once it's out there in the marketplace. I mean, there's a level of detail. And then sometimes, with the engineers too, they are so passionate. We need to help them kind of understand that, okay, the public doesn't necessarily need to know about every teeny tiny detail. This is what they want to hear. This is what's going to make them successful. So we know how to navigate, that path with folks.
I see Nick smirking there as an engineer. Nick, what?
I firsthand knowledge of both sides, because
right.
exactly what Amy talked about. I think the GT experience was a good example of that, where it was highly technical vehicle, very important things to get across, but at the same time we had to get that information across in a manner that the layman, the technician, the salespeople could understand, while also making it fun and engaging. And so that's just it, is how do you take that very technical information, but pare it down enough so anyone watching the video and hearing about the details can fully understand it. And I think that's something we did successfully.
Yeah, as Amy said, I think it's left brain, right brain. I love that term because it really, GT is a great example of expressing creativity, right? Again, for that engagement, making sure that it's exciting and that it is representing the brand properly, especially on such a large program like that, but also making sure that, again, our responsibility as technical authors, making sure that it absolutely 100% is safe and technically proper. And also that, as Amy said, representing the important things, but also culling it back, realizing that attention spans, in 2024 are getting a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter. So that in itself is an art, right? Is making sure that you get that information out, leading with the most important thing, right? Okay, so I'm going to actually move on to the next subject, which is personas and budgets, because cost is a thing in all of this, right? And as we talk about the importance of who the end user is, we want to share a little bit of information about how we define who that end user is, because it's not as simple as just an assumption. There's a lot of research that goes into that, and making sure that you are speaking, whether it be engineer or speaking technician, in all of those personas and those personalities that you are speaking to, help to define what that production value needs to be. Does everything need to be a, top blown off Ford GT project? Maybe not. As you speak to service technicians, their concerns are going to be a little bit more different. So I'm going to go ahead and again play a couple of things in the background. Well, Amy talks a little bit about that, what production value is and how we determine what is needed, and that we're not overdoing something that is necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll start on the high end of things like we've been mentioning with, the GT videos. And I mean, those videos, first of all, were aimed at obviously helping somebody understand their new purchase, but we also really had a good sense of what the end user on that product was going to be. You're talking about somebody very high end who is super excited about this amazing car that they've just purchased, and you want to reward that purchase and build on that excitement with some high production value that really doubles down on what this vehicle can do. And you're going to take it out in the racetrack and just kind of show them the ropes of owning this thing, and again reward that huge investment that they've just made. Now, flip to the other side, and maybe you have a product that's really popular with do-it-yourselfers, and you need to know that. So you need to then understand that, okay, I need to be there with videos to show them how to, and I'm going to continue on with engines and things like that, but, show them how to do an oil change, show them how to replace a tire, whatever the case may be. If you've got a do-it-yourself audience, you want to meet them there and make sure that they have the information they need so they don't break something on the product or end up dissatisfied. And then, to take it a step even further, if you're doing something internal for technicians, or folks on the factory floor, as I mentioned earlier, you don't need crazy production value. You need clarity, you need brevity, and you need to understand things like, are they going to be listening to this on the factory floor? Okay, then we're not going to have audio. We're going to be heavy in the visuals, maybe some text. So it's, there's a variety of approaches, and it is so important to know who's going to be digesting the content.
Yeah, and I will add, I think the delivery method as well is equally important, right? So we do a lot of benchmarking on that as well. A great example would be in a heavy equipment situation. If you've got a repair video, let's say for a large farming equipment, is that person going to have Wi-Fi? Do we need to make these downloadable? So environment is really important as well. And so I think, one of the things that we always recommend as a first step is exactly that, identifying who that user is, what is the environment that they're in, and how do we need to scale this to make sure that that it's inappropriate for them, and that the budget is appropriate for what that end use is as well. So, but I'm going to ask Amy a big question, which is, we can make it affordable anyway, right? We're brainstormers. We're clever folks who can come up with ideas aside from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a perception that video has to be really expensive, and it doesn't. There are clever ways that you can create efficiencies. And one thing I'd like to add about that too is that I think is maybe overlooked sometimes is that you can create one piece of video content, but that you can leverage it many different ways. So we have found, through creating consumer content, that all of a sudden, in the automotive space, we're getting requests from dealer training operations to, hey, can we use your videos to, get our salespeople ready to bring this product to market? There's myriad different ways that you can repurpose the content that you're creating for internal training purposes. There's just a lot of ways that you can get bang for your buck out of the material you're creating.
And I would also like to add to that or ask the question, which is translations, right? We're
Mhm.
all global companies. I mean,
Mhm.
I think, Nick, you're used to working with people on a global scale.
Yes, we are every day.
So,
Yep.
so that's also something that we have to take into consideration, right? It's not just the immediate environment that somebody's sitting in, but globally. And I will say it goes beyond just the translation portion of it, which which we love to do. I have experience in 32 different languages. Not that I speak all of them, but I've produced content for 32 different languages, which is incredibly fun, by the way. But also culturally, right? We know that we have to pay attention to those cultures, the nuances that may come along with some of that stuff. And so it's important for us to find partners who can supervise those translations, make sure that they are accurate. And so, we have a team that can help us with that, correct, Amy? We have resources.
Absolutely.
We've done that before. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And we have really efficient ways of doing it too, depending on what you need. We can do full voiceover and text translations. We can do subtitles. There's methodologies where you don't need either, and you just show visuals with, some nice music in the background, and then it kind of works for everybody. So, depending on the audience and what the needs of the communication are, yeah, I mean, there's a million different ways we can slice that.
Yeah. So let me ask this next question too. And I'm sorry, Nick, I'm going to ask Amy another question.
That's okay. I'm
I'll
listening.
bring you back in.
Yeah, that's all right.
Which is, is it an all in thing, or are some instances, like you had mentioned, that not everything needs audio, right? So there's all these elements that are within a production, as we've all experienced. Can you do a la carte? Can would there ever be a scenario where an audio only delivery might be appropriate, or animation might be more appropriate than a live action? What are the variables within production that you can offer?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And like you said, we can do motion graphics. We have found that CGI has been really helpful. That's computer generated imagery using CAD data. A lot of times that information is available before there's a physical product that you can shoot. So, we can leverage that and put your videos together without having, the product in hand. Which really helps with some timelines. There's a real push to get videos ready at start of sale, and sometimes they're in a vehicle head unit. You got to find a way to be there, and you may not have the product in hand to do that. So yeah, there are so many different ways we can approach the goals of a product video, and find really interesting ways to deliver the information based on the end users.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, I am going to switch one more time. And we are going to talk a little bit about making it valuable to that end user. We've talked about how to scale it. Now you've made an investment, right, as an OEM to do this, and you want to make sure that it's valuable, because otherwise, why bother doing it? So if you'll bear with me, again, everybody, thank you for your patience while I share yet another sequence of videos. With that end user in mind. And oh, look, there's some more for GT stuff.
It's looking good.
Still looks great. That's right.
It does look great. Speaking of motion graphics, we did utilize a lot of that on this Ford GT project. So let's talk about the elements within a video. How do we determine what needs to be shown? How do we determine how to display it? How to determine what tone of voice possibly to use? And I will say, I think one of the things that, again, Amy had mentioned earlier is that we tend to have intimate relationships with the engineers, right? Because a lot of the ways that we decide what to represent, how to represent it, will come from that. So, Amy, if you can expand a little bit on that production process, on how you determine what to show and where to show it.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, as we've been talking about, the first thing you're going to want to figure out is defining who your users are. Who's this content being created for? But probably one of the next questions I'm going to ask, especially if we've got a product that's been around for a while, what are your customer or end user pain points? What do you find that that users are struggling with? And let's make sure that we address those things so that we can increase the success rate of using a particular product or feature. That's going to be a really key point. As you talked about, we're going to talk about budget and try and figure out where we need to be to get some content created for you effectively. So, I mean, those are probably the three big hitters in my mind. But then we also have a lot of internal expertise just having created things like this. Like, we're going to be able to make some suggestions after sitting with your engineers or sitting with your product owners and getting to know your product. We're going to be able to identify some things that we think are going to be important to be communicated to your audience as well. Because we've just kind of gotten used to it over the years. We have a lot of knowledge in that area. Is there a new technology on your product, something new to market that you really want to make sure lands well? We're going to dig into that for you.
So I'm going to ask Nick a question then, because you said it's not just one and done. We don't just produce a video and then, hope it just lasts forever, right? How important is that communication, Nick, as an engineer, knowing that things do evolve, right? Over and over. How important is that communication with the person that is producing those videos and making sure that there is an accuracy there, and just having a relationship, right? To be able to be free to call up and say, this is changing, heads up.
It's crucial. I think we've all been there where you go to work on something and maybe you have the next year model and all of a sudden it's like, well, wait, this doesn't match this instruction book I'm looking at. This part has changed, or this is a screw now where before it was a clip or something like that. So the change process, it's going to happen. It's just natural during product development and as products mature. So you definitely want to capture all that. And I think just maybe to go back a little bit, but it still applies, is establishing the right team up front when you're going to design these videos. Oftentimes, it's really easy to grab, the so-called experts, the marketing team and the engineers, but really think about that end user. Go grab the technician. That's going to be the one maybe utilizing that video, perhaps only on their phone because they're out in the garage, or they might be fortunate enough to have a pad or something, and they're going to provide insight that you might not think about in terms of how they're going to do it. Their hands are greasy, they're wearing gloves, whatever that is. What do they want to see so they feel that it's a successful product.
Yeah, that's really a really good insight. Thank you for sharing that. So it actually brings up the next thing that I sort of want to wrap up a little bit with here is, what does all this result in? So Nick, you just talked about making sure that end user that they felt seen and heard, right? This is my scenario that I'm in. This is actually helpful for me. What, in your opinion, what does that build? Does that build trust of your brand? I mean, we know it will bring customer satisfaction, but what are the other things that you think are advantageous to that brings to the table?
Well, first and foremost, because it's one of our top requirements and expectations, is quality. Nobody likes to have to, there's maintenance and then there's repairs. And so when you think about that, no one wants to have their vehicle in and then get something back and it's not repaired right, or the service wasn't done right. And so if you do have instructions that are clear and can help that technician or the service person, or again, the salesperson, be able to educate and describe to the customer what's going to happen, then they feel confident. They know they're going to get the product back confidently. Or even up front, same thing. When you're perhaps manufacturing and putting something together. You want it to be done right the first time, with quality and with reasonable amount and a reasonable pace. So there's the quality aspect. And I also think, again, it's education. Consumers they are more savvy now. They do have that opportunity, like was talked about earlier, to do a lot of research up front. And when you have things like video to show them up front, not just how the product operates, but maybe they do want to dig in a little bit and understand how things are assembled and built. It builds, I bring it up a lot, but at the confidence. People want to feel confident. They want to feel like they understand the product, how to use it. And so that's a big thing, is making people feel happy about their purchase.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that just came to mind that you will both appreciate is the right to repair laws that are changing, right? And that's been going on for a little while. It started in automotive, and it is expanding to other pieces of software and tools. So how how do you think that video can help with those scenarios as well? Because I think that takes it to a different level, right? Is now you're talking to people who may not necessarily be the technicians who are used to working on these things, but now absolutely need the access to that information. So how can video play a role in that as well? And I'm asking both of you, whoever has an answer.
Go ahead, Nick, if you want.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when you think about a lot of mechanical products in the past, it was a little easier to take something apart and assemble it just because, again, it's mechanical in nature. But now that there's so many much more modules and software and calibrations and things like that, it's not something you can directly see, but having a video where you can explain how the systems operate with one another, show someone doing diagnostics, on a computer when they're plugged in, how the software download should look. Oftentimes you are trying to say, upload firmware or something like that, and you don't, am I done? Can I press a button? You can show what you should be seeing on screen. And again, it's building that confidence. It's stuff that isn't easy to understand just by reading a list of instructions, whereas visually you can see how long perhaps something is supposed to take and what visual indications you should be getting when you're working in that kind of environment.
Yeah. So visual representation is important, Amy, huh?
A little bit. Yeah. And I mean, again, I think, when you have this right to repair, I think, from a brand perspective, I think users are going to be impressed if you're not giving them the runaround and, forcing you to dig for this information. And you're there saying, yeah, we get it. Some of you want to do this stuff yourself, and we're going to make that available for you. For me, that's an investment in your brand, is to make sure that you're there for everybody, even if they're not showing up at your repair centers or whatever. I think that's going to build brand loyalty.
It also can reduce cost too, right? So if we talk about the automotive space and talk about things that could be resolved, let's say, for example, before a customer brings the vehicle into a dealership. Warranty costs, right? Oops, this broke. Now I've got a warranty issue that I've got to deal with because the instructions aren't there. There's cost save in that. Would you agree that can help reduce costs on the back end?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
I think, too, the right to repair. I mean, this is an opportunity to say, you probably really do want to use this particular type of tool. And maybe it's a tool that your company manufactures, right? Or it's really essential that you use this particular type of lubricant or whatever it is. I mean, it's another opportunity to make sure that, you're getting the right stuff in people's hands, but also still promoting, some of your product.
Yeah, accessories, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of different products have
Aftermarket.
accessories.
Yeah, aftermarket for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, Nick, do vehicles have accessories that need to be installed?
It's only a multi-billion-dollar industry. Absolutely, they do. Yeah, and it's growing. It continues to grow. That's one of the best things, right? People that use vehicles, of course, as an example. They want to accessorize it to kind of give their personal expression or to make it more useful for what they do. If it's camping, if it's trailering, if it's, off-roading, whatever it is. So oftentimes that is what may be one of the first purchases they make, where they'll go to do the install themselves. And again, it comes back to, you just have a list of instructions for someone that maybe has never bolted a part on before versus the opportunity to go and see a video and watch step by step, and exactly, oh, that's right. I have to press a little harder maybe to snap this in, or I have to turn this one clockwise and versus counterclockwise on a specific fastener. It's those kinds of things that are easier to pick up visually.
It's interesting that you bring up the press a little harder, because we're all afraid, right, as we're installing something, whether it be blinds or whatever, and you're like, it won't go in, but I don't want to press any harder.
Yep.
And to have that
Exactly.
video to support that, to say, yes, you absolutely need to press a little harder. It's okay. It's not going to break. So I have my one last question, and then we're going to open it up for for Q&A for audience. But, Nick, you talked about quality and the importance of quality. And I want to ask Amy how her team maintains quality, because I think there's an interesting thing that happens in a team who is incredibly passionate and who lives that product, right? They express that same level of quality and passion that engineer has trusted us with.
Yep.
So tell me the steps within the team, those catches, like I think a good example would be the editor, whereas in a normal scenario, an editor might just be the last, putting the creative piece together. That's not how our editors work, though, are they?
No, I mean, truly every member of our team, whether they're a writer, a producer, an editor, a CGI artist, they are subject matter experts on our products because they have to be. But, one of the things, because, we are a lot of times creating a lot of information that needs to be maintained year over year, throughout model changes, throughout product releases, things like that. We are very, very process driven. It is so critical that we have detailed processes, that we have content management systems, that we have intense quality check. So along with the subject matter expertise, you get we're constantly looking at process improvements. How can we do things more efficiently? How can we do things more accurately? We are tracking internal KPIs. One of our editors, and I love her for this, she has her own set of KPIs that she holds herself to make sure that she is putting out content that is as error-free as possible. And it's led to her setting up her projects in a very specific way that, that gives her the confidence to ensure that she's tracking changes accurately. And that's different from, producing a 30-second commercial for a brand, for example. And that doesn't demean that process at all, because there's a lot that goes into that. But, when you are dealing with very tiny details and frankly, a lot of minutia that, perhaps isn't the most engaging, but it is critically important, you have to have those processes, and you have to have the subject matter experts that can question if something doesn't seem quite right, and work with our clients to get it sorted out.
Yeah, it's talking about that relationship that Nick was talking about earlier, right? Is to be able to pick up the phone and call that engineer and be able to speak and say, this is what's going on, and have that communication. Because I suspect that all of those catches probably are reassuring to you, Nick, as the production process goes. Coming from an industry who also is very heavy on KPIs and metrics and process driven, right?
Yeah, it's so
There's a
much about
process for the processes.
There's a process.
Yeah, right. No, that's true. And I mean, it's so much about knowing the right questions to ask too. And, that comes with a lot of experience. Whether you're creating content about a piece of software, or a vehicle, or a consumer product like an appliance. It's important to know what to ask.
Yeah. And how to set
Yeah,
a
I mean,
project up.
my experience with, what we did, the editor was knowledgeable enough with the content that they could develop the pacing and everything right, and know how long to kind of stay on a visual so that you did have enough time to see what was happening. And then during, when then it was thrown back our way, we had, even though us engineers like to think we know it all, we certainly don't. And so you have a cross section of people to kind of do that final look, where we each have the thing we're maybe truly experts on that we can pick up And as each person drops in those little final things, then you get a product that's just cohesive. The flow is good. You catch everything, and that's where the quality, I think, is ultimately, that's how you ensure it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm going to be respectful for time here. We all know I could just talk endlessly for another 2 hours about this subject, but I'm not going to do that. And I will leave you with this. This isn't the end. If you come up with a question, if you want a demo, if you're curious, if you just want to hear me and Amy chat some more, you're welcome to give us a call. We hope you found that the conversation was interesting. I'd like to thank Nick and Amy again for joining. Lots of smiles, lots of good conversation. Thank you so much. I hope you have a brilliant rest of your Thursday, and peace, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks. Have a
There
great day.
it is.
Thanks, Nick.
All right. Thanks, folks.